Hi, this is Paul, and we have a real treat today. Over the last few months, I've been sort of gathering people who have been sort of coalescing around the channel. And I emailed Sherry, maybe about a month ago, and said, I'd love to get a follow-up on this artists project that you launched, because if you can go back, and I'll put the link below to my original conversation with Sherry, and yeah, it's happening. So I want to hear all about it. So maybe we'll start with introductions. Someone's got kind of a noisy mic. Is that you, Eric?
I bet it is. I sometimes mute Eric myself. So
yep. So I muted him. So he can unmute when he's ready to be in the room. So Sherry, why don't you begin just with a brief introduction? If you want a longer introduction, very much go to it was a very interesting conversation, but go ahead, Sherry.
My name is Sherry Harkins. I am thoroughly enjoying this opportunity to be with other spiritually minded artists. It's been such a gift, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak with you and to get this going. It wasn't something I had planned. So, you're bringing it up and saying, what did I want to do was just an amazing project. So it's been really interesting. We've had people coming and going still. We've had a few new people that have started just recently. We had people that came and then stopped coming for a while. It's a mix of all different ages, all different media. And it's really been a great experience. So
awesome. Caleb, you and I have also had a conversation. So why don't you give at least a little introduction to yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I'm Caleb Boyles. I'm a film student currently working towards my master's degree in film production. Just happy to be a part of a group where we can talk about spiritual interests and art, because that's pretty rare. And I think we've been doing this for close to a year, I think. And it's been really, really positive, just being able to discuss ideas that not everybody's open to. And this group is very, very open. And I think it's, at least for me, it's very, very much boost my creativity and my engagement with these things. And I think, there's a lot of people in our group who kind of came here as an answer to Jonathan Peugeot's call to artists. And we're still sort of getting the groundwork under us, but I think we're starting to see the shift towards producing stuff, producing art that starts to capture what everybody's talking about right now. So.
Okay. And Miranda, you and I have never spoken, so why don't you let us know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Miranda Thompson. I'm 23. I'm an animator. I live in Ottawa, Ontario. Yeah, I'm happy to be a part of this group. I'd been wanting a Christian art group, or an art group willing to discuss like spiritual matters as well, for a while. So this is really good.
Why is it so difficult? Or why was it, I don't know, was it difficult? I don't know. Why did it take this to get this kind of group going?
I can say a little bit about it. I think that there is a tendency among people who are arts minded to dismiss the ideas that might come out of faith or spirituality. And that's certainly a part of it. There's sort of an unwillingness to even sort of go there and think about it. I know in the beginning, Caleb described a few projects that he proposed that were rejected just because they had a religious theme. And I find the same thing with painting. Either people are just not at all sure what I'm talking about, but kind of unwilling to engage. If they find out what it's about, they might not want to know more about it. The art world is a very interesting thing in terms of galleries and paintings. And I know that's probably a little bit different than film and animation. So I don't want to go too far down that road, but people are either thinking they don't understand what the visual art is about, or they do understand and it's very different than the place that I might be coming from. If that is a good way to start it.
Okay. Any of the rest of you thoughts on that?
Yeah, going off that, I can say it's a very similar experience in film. I think there's something about spirituality or religion in general sort of being viewed as like it's going to be one-dimensional. And so people assume that they already know what's coming if you're in that territory, and they write it off immediately as something that's not going to produce anything of much artistic value. And I think it's just sort of a misunderstanding where we're at in the culture right now of thinking that those are old ideas or ideas that we have moved past and not actually the source of something. I think even like a lot of the discussion around left brain, right brain thinking, a lot of people don't realize they're writing off like one big creative source, a way of channeling the right brain by ignoring religious ideas. And that just because something is going to be religious doesn't mean it's going to be dogmatic. So I don't know, that I sense what Sherry does too. And I think the tides are starting to shift a little bit, but it's taking people willing to have these conversations and push through that to sort of get things flowing again.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say one-dimensional is a very good term for it. People do, they sort of assume they already know what it's about and it's been said before, and so it doesn't need to be engaged with.
I mean, this is very interesting to me, because on one hand, you might say, well, religious people are going to like make pictures of Jesus on the cross, but during the Renaissance, nobody certainly had the idea that you could have too many of those. I mean, there's religious artwork is all over the place in the Renaissance, and some of that art is some of the most valuable art we have today, and people will go to cities from all over the world to see that art. Yet they imagine that, and I think here I think here this line between that we've constructed between religious and spiritual comes to the fore, because I would assume if you would go into the marketplace and say, oh, I'm here to do art about spirituality. Oh, tell me more. Oh, I'm here because I'm a religious person. Then it'll be just simply nostalgic, you know. Is that the idea?
And cheesy too.
Cheesy.
Mm-hmm.
So let's, because this is so much fun. We all know cheesy when we see it, but what is it?
We've had this discussion a little bit.
I would imagine you have.
Like, what is kitsch? And
yeah,
you know, what about work? Like work by Thomas Kincaid.
Yeah. I wasn't going to mention him, but I thought of him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know people who love Thomas Kincaid, so, you know, more power to him. He is or was speaking to something and bringing something to mind for people that I think was good and important and beautiful, and it might not speak to everyone, but it spoke to a certain audience. So I think that's great.
I think for the most part, when we find something cheesy or kitsch, it's because there's either like a lack of depth or a lack of honesty or something like that. So, and that might, well, and maybe some of us see depth and honesty in things that other people don't see it in, but I think that's what it is, more or less.
There's very much a crossover here for preaching, or if I were to use the fancy word, homiletics, at least in my profession, because as a pastor, you know that in any given congregation, and this is true of, let's say, progressive mainline churches or conservative, evangelical church, I'm sure it's true of Catholic or Orthodox churches, that to one degree or another, to rehearse certain themes, certain code words, certain stories will get immediate approval and acceptance and even applause, especially given the overall context. But I, as a pastor, tend to, I don't usually like to go there, because this is where we get, there's so much going on beneath the surface here, because this is where we might say this seems to feel inauthentic, let's say. And I think part of this, I think one of the more important Jordan Peterson conversations recently that hasn't gotten anywhere near enough attention was his conversation with Clay Rutledge, where they went into nostalgia. Because when I think about Thomas Kincaid, and I certainly know his popularity, and again, to be a popular artist obviously is not something that any of you would probably turn your nose up at, but his popularity people have often criticized as banking on nostalgia. But nostalgia is a very interesting thing, because I think part of what Clay Rutledge point he made was you can't really live without it. And so being able to articulate what exactly we're talking about here, why we might not imagine that Thomas Kincaid is necessarily what you guys are after, gets into, I think, this question, especially if you have a group where probably if you're meeting over Zoom, and we'll get to how you're processing this, because I'm interested in that too, to a certain degree, figuring out how to conceptualize and articulate this with one another and critique each other's work, et cetera, gets at this very difficult thing of saying, what exactly are we talking about here?
What you just said reminded me of your conversation with Catherine and the Wilsons, where you were talking about using certain language automatically makes you belong within a certain place. And I think that we're trying to challenge some of the language, but not discount it.
Okay.
So, going off that,
keep going, Caleb.
Yeah, that might be a really interesting thing to try to use to break some of this up and get underneath it. The in-group, out-group language problem is something that I see even within our own group. Some people feel like they can't access certain conversations because of that. And I think that to some degree is determining what's cheesy and what's kitsch, is when something sort of becomes a shell of itself. And like with church, you can often end up in this Christian code dialogue where everything is framed within certain words and phrases with presumed knowledge of what those things mean. And if you don't have that knowledge, the words mean absolutely nothing. So there's a hard divide between in and out group. The people who know all of that language feel very at home and familiar in that place, but it might also be limiting them and preventing them from kind of going beyond what they've sort of boiled it down into. And the thing is if what was true that created that group and oriented that group around something, if it's true, you actually should be able to find it again with different language. And so the process of trying to reach new people and reach a new audience is the same thing of you should be able to recast that entire structure without relying on any of those words and still be able to communicate it. And I think sometimes you have to do that because it's become inaccessible to anybody who doesn't have like built up knowledge about the thing.
And even for people who do have built up knowledge or have learned the other language, it's super helpful to think about it in a different way with a different language, I would think.
Do you mean the language around the idea of like Vervaeke and Peterson and Paul, and is that what the language that you're referring to, those sort of concepts that come out of that, or something else?
For me, I would be referring to the language that you tend to find in the church, especially with people who've been in the church for most of their life. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot, like very simply tithe. Tithe is an assumed term with a lot of connotation, but somebody who's completely outside of the church, that word is so foreign, the context is so foreign, and you would have to explain like a list of things for them to even understand why you're doing that.
Mhm.
So actually, I would say Peterson, Vervaeke, Paul, all of these people who are discussing are actually getting back to explaining what all of these things meant with completely different language. And I think that's part of why it's accessible to so many people.
But you're right that we definitely, once you have a community that starts really working together, you're going to develop that new language, because that new language is essentially a shortcut, because the meaning is in some ways residing within the community. It's not really necessarily residing within the words, sort of within the context of the words, but not just the words, also the community. And so let's say, if you just recently, one of our church plants, they were able to purchase a building from a Lutheran church that was dying basically. And it had some stained glass. They didn't like the stained glass that was there. So they replaced a lot of the stained glass just with clear glass. But then at the front of the church, they put in a completely new piece of stained glass, which was, a stained glass artist. There aren't a lot of them, but one of the most prominent stained glass artists in the country then designed that and put it in. It's a beautiful piece. But so, and that, I think, especially with artists, this then gets to, okay, it's going to be what, some kitschy old rugged cross, or, I mean, it's this strange need we have to continue to update basically to keep sort of the narrative thread through time. So you as artists are using different media. I tend to use words because I'm a pastor. Pastors, hopefully, at least at one level or another in homiletics, use words as our art. You all are using film, painting, other different media, but you're trying to keep this thread. And in a sense, you need to connect the past, but because the world keeps changing too, that would be somehow, I understand it. And beneath all of that, we're trying to articulate that which can't be fully articulated. So go ahead.
I just said trying to point beyond, trying to go somewhere else. Speaking of stained glass too, I wanted to say Eric did text and say he's sorry he's having connections problems, but he is an amazing stained glass artist. So it's too bad he's not able to be here.
Yeah, it's too bad. Because it was interesting because the artist who did, our church plant, I mean, if you're a stained glass artist who specializes in churches, you don't get a lot of projects every year, probably, because now is not sort of the boom in church building in North America today. So you're going to probably have to deal with Catholics, Orthodox, evangelicals don't do a lot of stained glass. Mainline tend to do more. Let's talk a little bit about where your group, I mean, part of what I see happening in this little corner of the internet is that while there's sort of a rush towards orthodoxy from some of our group, there's sort of we don't feel like we exactly fit in the standard categories right now. Is that true of your group?
You mean the standard art category?
Well, yeah. I mean, again, it's interesting to me. I would have thought that people have been doing art. I mean, people have not stopped doing art. for a very long time. Artists have a need to connect with each other over the art, because doing it by yourself isn't, I would imagine, anywhere near as much fun as doing it with others, getting pushback, getting either criticism or encouragement, on and on and on and on. And so I would have imagined that there would just sort of be standard art networks all over the place to encourage the doing of art. And the fact that this has sort of started here is interesting to me, because, oh, that showed that not all artists were serviced by the art network. What's that about?
I find there's a lot of art communities available to me, but they don't go deeper into the meaning behind the art so much. It's like you're always encouraging each other to push yourself technically, which is really good. Specifically in the animation community in my city and stuff. But there's not a lot of discussion about, well, yeah, what's behind it. So that's what I was missing.
I would agree with that. I think a lot of the conversation that you can have about art, and I mostly experience it with film, but I do experience it sometimes with photography and painting and those sorts of things. You can explore technique endlessly in these groups. And you can explore certain styles to an extent, but the underlying motivations is, there's not very many places to discuss that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I would say it's an interesting question. I'm trying to think about the different groups that I have had critique with. I used to think I was a pretty deep thinker until I got involved with these people, and now I feel like such a novice compared to other people and how they think and where they're going and what they've read and what they're aware of. So part of it is, you know, I have a few Christian artist friends, and that's what I was sort of thinking about with the language before, because I've had people that have been interested in joining the group, and I always encourage them to, but I know that if they're not familiar with this corner of the internet, they don't know what they have no history with, like, who Jordan Peterson is and where he's coming from and what he's spoken about. So if we do a conversation that's based around one lecture, they don't have any of the history. They don't know anything else that's there. I just had someone ask me the other day when I was at a church group about doing something with art, and a meeting, and this church that I'm going to is doing some cool things. They have some big plans. I'm excited about the possibilities there, and in fact, they're interested in doing our first show. They're building a whole art community there and want to have their launching project be our Exodus show, which is very exciting. And I feel like the Lord's putting this all together. But a couple of people said, can anyone join? Because they had heard about I was doing this group, and I said, you're very welcome to come. But like, I just kind of want to let you know, here's some things you might want to check out before you come, and know that we talk about things like psychedelics. This is not your average Christian art group. It's very different than that. And so there's a little bit of having to sort of get to that space. Like, that's what's so wonderful about this. I think having this shared background of information that we've all been considering and thinking about, even though we don't all think the same about many things, including psychedelics, there's still this place where we can come that we know people have been entertaining some of the same ideas. And that's very, very helpful. In my group of people that are not believers, who might, maybe some of them would call themselves Christians, but they haven't, even that I don't think is likely. But they're like, if I bring up a piece of work and I want to talk about it, it's all technique, like what Caleb and Miranda were saying. It's all a discussion about technique. And if you try to, like, for me, when I put a painting out there, something that I've done, it's an incredibly vulnerable thing. I imagine this is the same thing for film or animation. It's like I'm pouring the inside of myself out and sharing it with somebody and asking them to respond to it. And when people have no comprehension of what I might be trying to say and are likely to discount it just because of the place I'm coming from, it's just so hard. It's like a kind of intense rejection that is so personal and so related to my faith as well. So I kind of feel like I don't want to explain it, which is fine. I've put lots of work out there in galleries or other places that I haven't given any explanation, and people can appreciate it for the technical aspect of it or for the meaning that they might bring to it, because I think that is something that happens too. If God's in it, I feel like he's going to work with it no matter who sees it. But when I do want to talk about it, I hope very much that people can have some response that is respectful and interested and exploratory.
It's really interesting. You know, it's funny because as a pastor, it's just very interesting listening to this, because people don't usually think of what pastors do in terms of artistry. And maybe there's a reason for that. That isn't a good thing. But, you know, when you do put out a sermon, you do put it out into the world. And, you know, part of the difference perhaps with us is that we're on a clock and we do it very regularly. And, you know, and now I do it with videos to a degree. I put out a video there, and, you know, some of the videos are dogs and some of the videos are surprises, and you never quite know what's going to happen to a video that you put out there. But it is also interesting the way that, you know, so now in this little corner of the internet is pretty much, it's a very thinky talky space. A lot of words, a lot of thinking, a lot of talking. But then, you know, the artists are sort of that thinky talky world, and this other world out of which comes this art are connected. But boy, what a mysterious connection.
Mm.
So tell me a little bit about the practice of your group. How often do you get together? What kinds of things do you do? What's going on with that? I'm really curious about it, because I certainly do videos and I do sermons and do all of that, but I'm really curious about groups and communities. And so the fact that you guys got off the ground fairly quickly, I'm really curious about what you do and what that's like.
I don't want to keep talking so much. So you guys talk a little bit and then I'll.
Well, we meet regularly every other Wednesday evening over Zoom. And usually there's a video or an article or something that we discuss or we use as a starting point for the discussion for that evening. And then we also have a Discord, which a lot of us are quite active on. So yeah, that's mainly what we're doing.
And I mean, the meetings are sort of the backbone of what we've been doing since the beginning. And I'd just like to say part of what I think works so well about them, and I think is part of the reason we've formed pretty quickly, is they're hyper open and they're hyper exploratory. So we often set a subject and everybody tries to get on the same page of having watched the lecture or the documentary or whatever it is that we're going to discuss that week. But then once we get into the meeting, there's almost no structure. We just have Sherry sort of guiding us. And we don't know what direction we're going to go in. And there's sort of no limitation to what direction we can go in. And you find that sometimes we spin out pretty far in one direction or the other, but then that ends up connecting for somebody and bringing it back. So there's that openness, I think, is what lets a lot of people who are from very different backgrounds feel like they have room to speak and think and they don't just have to mimic what somebody else is saying or doing.
We've also done critique sessions as well, or I don't know if you'd call them critique, but like we show our work, what we're working on, and discuss that as well. So that brings in more of our artwork.
It's kind of, sounds almost like an art inklings group, where Lewis and Tolkien would bring whatever they're working on, they read it to the group, and then the group, kicks it around. Who sets who picks what you're going to treat at the next meeting and discuss?
People volunteer things, right? Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
Miranda, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say it really depends. People usually suggest things in a meeting that we can do next time, or
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So even that is quite open. There's not one of you who's just sort of setting an agenda and everyone's deciding on that, but what's sort of keeping the routine going is coming up also from the group.
Yes, I usually do some like starter questions, like when I send out the Zoom link, here's some things to think about. And then, but we don't, like Caleb said, we sort of go all over the place from there. It's just kind of so that we come together. It's interesting too, in the beginning, I mean, now I think we probably average, I don't know, what you guys would say, like 9 to 12 each meeting, but in the beginning we had as many as like 24 that would be there, and that was too many people for a single. So we did breakout rooms, and some people really liked that and other people did not. I think it certainly, my role, I feel like, is just facilitating, and that's something that I have a background in, but it's very different to facilitate a group, on Zoom than it is when you're in person. And I think sometimes it's hard for people. Some people have a lot of wonderful things to say, and it's more difficult to sort of give other people an opportunity to speak in. And so especially in a breakout session, if there isn't somebody who's kind of facilitating the particular breakout session, that can be trickier. So I don't know if that is why people had less comfort with that. We lost a few people in the beginning after the breakout session. So I'm guessing, it may have had something to do with how things went there. I think it's been good when we've been able to all stay in the same space, but I know that could change too. It's just everything's very open, whatever happens. And I also know, from years of facilitating Bible studies, sometimes people don't speak very much, but they really appreciate being there anyway. They're kind of more interested in just listening and absorbing, and they'll speak things if they want to and not speak things if they don't. So I know that's not a judgment on how they're participating or not participating. They may just be doing it more quietly. So
One of the constant conversations has been the cyber interaction versus the in-person physical interaction. What have you noticed about that in this development?
We haven't had the chance to experience any in-person interactions with I don't think anyone from the group yet. I don't think any two of us have met yet. So it's very interesting in that way. But strangely, like, I don't do well on Zoom at all. I can't learn a lecture through Zoom almost at all. But weirdly, it'd be really interesting to see what we're like in person. But weirdly, there is a sense of connection and there is a sense of interpersonal relation when we're meeting in Zoom. I don't know why, but it doesn't feel too different from meeting in person, other than the few technical hiccups.
How spread out is your group?
Very
geographically?
spread out.
Yeah.
There's even some people in Europe, which is crazy because they have to join us at ungodly hours, but
and there's some of our most consistent, the people who have to join us at 3 a.m.
Well, it's because they don't have anything else at 2 in the morning. It's that or sleep or Netflix. And that's a huge issue in, I mean, I'm really hopeful COVID is going to pretty much go away and I can just probably start doing local meetups again. And one of the things that the pandemic sort of shut down was, I mean, Job was out in California and we were doing kind of a West Coast tour. We were down in Arizona and then we're in Southern California, and we were going to go up to, Northern California here, then up to Oregon and Seattle and British Columbia. I mean, we had a whole trip planned, and Job very quickly was like, I got to get back to the Netherlands. I don't know if they're going to close borders. I mean, we had no idea when this pandemic thing took off, what it was going to be like. So, but there's been, I think, a lot of pent up potential and desire for more in-person connecting. And I can really see that for a group like yours, where, you can put your camera on some of those paintings behind you, but I've seen enough paintings in real life to know that seeing a picture of a painting is not seeing a painting. And yeah, you can do some of maybe your animation or your film work can be shared online. But again, in person, especially with art, it's something that is so potentially communal, and being there, especially for artists, is of such value. My older sister is an artist, and artists, pastors who are especially dependent, evangelical pastors who are especially dependent on musicians, get well acquainted with artists' temperaments, because artists are artists. They tend to be expressive, sometimes outspoken. They express, and if you're pastors are kind of weird creatures, because we got a little bit of artists going here, but we're also kind of small business managers, and and then also kind of scholarly types too. So it's a very odd profession that way. But I'm curious how much potential you guys think, if once we can sort of say, okay, with a fair amount of confidence, 3 months from now, hopefully travel will continue to be mostly unrestricted and people won't have to get things stuck up their nose and sit in a hotel room for 2 weeks or whatever kind of crazy things international travel is requiring these days. Do you think your group might get some kind of a rhythm of, let's say, a yearly or or some kind of regular, we're going to get together at this place for 2-3 days, something like that?
That didn't even occur to me, but that's a lovely idea. That'd be great. That'd be great. I told Caleb recently, he was working on something that he might have to come to the area. And I was like, well, you guys can come stay at my house. And, and that holds true for anybody in the group. They'd be welcome to come. And, if I was going to be heading out towards the area that anybody else lived in, I would love to pop in and see them and say hello in person. I did meet Eric in person because he's not too far from me. He's in a studio in Boston, and that's not far from where I am. So I did get to go and see his studio space and talk to him in person, and that was really nice. So
yeah, I've been writing my film for him pretty hard about trying to take you up on that offer, because I think I agree with Sherry. It's not something I had thought about, but it's something that's very exciting, the thought of actually meeting up like once a year or something. The Exodus gallery that we're putting together, I've been very hopeful that some of us will be able to get together in person and sort of expand the relationship a little bit. So yeah, I think there's a lot of pent up potential and desire for that, for sure.
Tell me about this.
All think,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Paul. I was just going to say, I'm very seldom on Discord. I just can't fit it into life, but I know Miranda and Caleb are both on it quite a bit. And it seems like that has given you a lot of opportunity to develop relationship for those of you that are on Discord. Is that true?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's why I said the meetings are the backbone, because there's a lot of meat that we've built up doing different things. Like even Chris Petco's channel, like a lot of it came from just us having meetings together to try to get to know each other better. I know the first couple months I met with you, Sherry, and then I tried to get as many people as I could get a hold of, try and do like even an hour meeting, even if we had nothing to talk about, just to try to get interpersonal connections. And the Discord helps a lot with that, because we've broken it down. Nay's done such a good job of breaking it down into a lot of subjects, so you can ignore most of it and it's just the same 20 people floating around, but you can ignore most of it. And if you just want to be there for the memes, you can just be there for the memes. If you only want to talk about film, you can talk about film. But then if you want to jump out and see what are the painters doing, and what are the animators doing, what are the writers doing, and at any point you can just pick that up and give yourself an extra dose of that. So it's worked really, really well for building all of that.
That's and so see, because so Sherry and I are kind of on the old end of this group, and I do pop into the Discord, but I don't spend a lot of time there. Also, partly just because Discord, if Discord doesn't fit into your life, it's kind of a bit much. I mean, because, and I've tried different ways. I just can't write sermons, or I can't be on Discord while I'm talking to all of you. I mean, wouldn't work. So, so that's an issue, but that's a key thing that has developed when the guys at my local meetup said, well, we're going to start a Discord server. I didn't even know what a Discord server was, and took me a little while to sort of get up to speed in it. But, Joey and Rick and Tyler and Job, I mean, these are the guys who launched that thing. And then I discovered that you can just keep making new Discord servers. Doesn't cost you any money. And all you sort of need are a group of people that have, to one degree or another, are used to this forum and this platform and committed to each other. And you can really build, it's a lot of potential for building a community.
Yeah, I think it's a very cool thing. I mean, I feel like that I'm very excited about everybody else doing it. I wish I could do it more, and I just can't. In the beginning, I kept feeling left out and rejected because I wasn't a part of it. And then I just realized I just can't, but like you said, we're a little bit older. I have 4 kids, I've got grandkids, I have a husband, I have a mother, and a lot of other people in my life that require attention, and I enjoy that and appreciate it, and I feel so blessed by it. So but it's very cool that people have developed relationships and connection through that. And maybe someday I'll have more time, and maybe not, but that's okay.
Yeah. Tell me about the Exodus gallery.
Well, I can't remember. I mean, I know I've been reading through Exodus for months and discovering all sorts of new things, probably prompted by initially knowing that Jordan Peterson was going to be doing something about it. But I think I had the idea, right? I think it was me who brought it up initially, and just thought it would be really interesting if we could do a show and try to use all of the different talents and abilities that we have. And I just kind of felt like the Lord would provide a place that we could do it. At the very least, so many galleries have gone online and so many shows have gone online. When when galleries started to close, like I had a show that was in all the windows in a little city nearby, because it wasn't just mine, but I have a lot of big paintings. So we sort of did it down Main Street in the city in order to give people an opportunity to walk through the streets. And, there were bios on the artists and things that were written up. So coming up with different ways of showing work when you can't go in a gallery, plus a lot of people feel uncomfortable about going to a gallery anyway. So anyway, at the very least, we could do an online show, but I also thought there might be some other possibility of somewhere else. And then I had started going to this other church, and they have grown quite large, especially for a New England church. And they are meeting in a mall an old mall and have gotten through the process of purchasing a lot of it at very reasonable prices because of the fact that malls are no longer a viable option for retailers. So anyway, they have this space planned out for artwork and galleries and would like to include that and have the arts be more a part of them. So I got invited to be a part of the meetings and talking about it. So that's very exciting. But I'm also, I'm kind of feeling like it's going to be more than that. So if people want to contact me about if you're interested in seeing what we come up with, please do. We're going to open the call beyond just our group too, figuring out how we'll do that and what that will look like. But I feel like it's a God thing. So I'm excited for that reason.
That sounds awesome. I can't wait. I can't wait. There's a huge irony that in so many places, churches that go out of business are being, becoming stores and boutiques and things. And at the same time, malls that are going out of business are becoming churches.
That's great. Yes.
I love this idea, and I can't wait till there's something that I can point people to. Sally fairly early on, challenged me. She said, what about Protestants and art? Because of course, art has a huge history with Roman Catholics and Orthodox. And, there's been tension with respect to visual media and Christianity in certain Protestant circles. So I'm tremendously excited about this effort, and really, as a pastor, I'm a little unusual in that people now know it because I do it for my Sunday rough drafts. But for years here, almost when I grew up, my father was using the overhead with the clear plastic, and he would draw on it. He would use that for his sermons often. And then when I came back to North America, I thought, why don't preachers use any visuals? It just didn't make any sense for me. So then at that point, screens were first starting to go up in churches, and pastors played with it a little bit for the most part, but they pretty much abandoned it. But I kept up with it. And so, with my rough drafts, all that PowerPoint is just the way I started using it. And then obviously there was the need that I often have for, and obviously there's tension with respect to my tradition and this need for visuals. Okay. So, I recently preached a sermon with the woman at the well, and I can kind of go out with Google image search or Unsplash and stuff like that and find stuff, but to try to use visuals in the context of a sermon and therefore in church, most of the more recent art I really can't use because that would be violating copyright, and artists need to eat too, let's be fair. But so I'm super excited to see what you guys are going to put out. And I think it's really wonderful that to sort of piggyback on, whatever comes out from Jordan Peterson with respect to Exodus. Looks now like we'll actually get something at some point. We're hearing drips and drabs of it, but so I'm very excited about this.
I think there's going to be some cool things that come out of it, because we're starting to see the cross-pollinating start with the different artists, and some of the early stuff that we've got, if we can pull it off, it'll be a very unique show. Like the animatic that Miranda put together, to see her put something together completely in isolation that uses a lot of the same motifs as what I'm putting together. They're night and day different, but there's a lot of, I don't know what you call it, but parallel thinking is really interesting.
Wow. I'm really excited for this. I'm really excited for this.
And Miranda used Billy for voiceover, somebody else from our group, which is pretty cool. And then in the stained glass window that Eric recently shared, he hasn't shared it with the group yet, but I got to see it. A lot of his, some of the portions of the glass are painted on it, and I couldn't help but see that it reminded me of a lot of Emily's patterned colored pencil drawings, which is pretty cool. And now Emily and Chris, of course, are working on the book on Job. And so it is very exciting to see how things are playing off of one another.
Wow.
Mhm.
This is tremendously exciting. This really is. One of the surprises of my channel was just how many artists would listen to me. That took me completely by surprise. I never would have guessed that. But then there are animators, and first it was coders, and then tradespeople, and then animators. And I thought, I know nothing of this world. It's really cool. Well, I've pestered you guys with questions for almost an hour. Do you have any questions that you wanted to ask me?
I'm a little curious as you go forward with this, because I saw your discussion with the documentarian filmmaker who's also wanting to start an estuary, or something analogous, which I need to reach out to him. But I was curious, as you're watching this unfold from where you're sitting, do you have any thoughts of how you want to keep things at least somewhat connected, like keep stirring the communication between different groups and things like that? Is that anything that you're thinking about? Or because it definitely seems like you might be moving from one phase into another.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm hoping again to get back out to New England. My sister has I don't really know how to describe it. She's basically got a big house she's sort of an Airbnb type thing, or bed and breakfast type thing. So before the pandemic, I did just basically said, here's, get in touch with my sister if you want to stay with her and camp on her lawn. I mean, you stay anywhere you want, but we're gonna have free flow conversation for 2 days. And 12 people showed up, and most of them flew there, which really took me by surprise. And we basically had continuous conversation for a couple of days. I want to be able to use this church space here in Northern California for some small conferences. It's a small church, but I think small is really nice for conferences. I mean, we'd be limited to like 100 people, and we can fly, again, once Peugeot or Vervaeke can get in with some kind of get them in here. There's the Thunder Bay thing. I very much want to see more in-person, face-to-face meetings, because I think it's just different. But I've right from the start knew, I wanted to encourage people to do exactly what you all are doing. Because when people get together and form usually small communities, tremendous things come out of that. And I think one of the things you notice that, well, you can't really do 24 on Zoom. You can do it technically, but you can't really do it interpersonally. And there's a power about groups of 6 or 8 people getting together with a degree of repetition. And I mean, Christianity is Jesus gathers a dozen, and there's a few more around the fringes too, but Jesus gathers 75 or 72 or 128 people, and the world changes. So I do want to continue to encourage people to get together, to talk, to have conversations, to share, and see where it goes. And I've been amazed at what's come already. Early phases, you had Job and the Discord doing a podcast. You had Randos United. Karen Wong had her channel. So a whole bunch of people started like these YouTube channels where they sort of did conversations. But then, I think later we saw Grim Grizz and Chris and Chad and then your group. And so I very much want to encourage groups like yours to play around with this stuff and see what happens. And for most of us, even, like Sherry, I've got a wife, I've got 5 kids, I've got a church, there are limitations to how much of different things I can do, but the electronics seems to afford things that I couldn't do without the electronics. And so I don't have some big plan by any means. Because everything that I've accomplished in the last 4 years has been total surprise. So that's
I
what I'm
have a
up to.
question.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what you're talking about reminded me, one of the things that I find I struggle with now is not having enough clear headspace, because there's so much I want to listen to and so many things I want to read and so much I want to pay attention to. And so like recognizing I just can't do Discord is one, small step in that direction. But how do you balance that? I mean, I'm finding that harder and harder. I don't know if time is going faster or if I'm just moving slower or if there's just so much more going on, but I notice a very big difference in my ability to process from having too much stimulus all the time. So I'm wondering for you, what is that like? How do you balance it?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I do it particularly well. I have rhythms in my life that are rather unbreakable. And I mean, people often say, well, you read a lot of video, or you watch a lot of video and read a lot of books. Not as much as you think I do. And in fact, a lot of the stuff I process is just a way to process for me. So, but you're right in that I often think I have to find ways to sort of take a step back, get some quiet space in order to get perspective, to prioritize and say, this is where I need to focus my attention. And these are the goals that I should have. I probably would be, well, see, I've got mixed feelings about this, because on one hand, I think if I were very goal directive, I suspect a lot of those goals would be too predictable, isn't the right word. There's one of the things that I found. So as a pastor, there's always more to do, because you can put more work on your sermon. You can put more time into this group of people, even in a church of 50, 60 people, which is kind of what this church is down to right now. There are 4 or 5 people that are squeaky wheels, and I can invest all of my time into those 4 or 5 people. And so you have to have a little discipline about, they need their attention. And so I've always, not always, but I've sort of taken on sort of a God runs my calendar approach, where, if a homeless person comes in front of me, I give them some attention. And I sort of allow there's some people who really want me to watch their videos, and people are always sending me videos. I'm fairly comfortable with the idea that the right video to watch is going to emerge, and I don't know how. That's a very artisty thing. So I've got some of my sister's art DNA in me, but but you're right, that question about where to focus our attention is really critical. But again, if I didn't have Living Stones, which sort of puts me on a weekly format, so Mondays are pretty free, often Monday afternoon, Zoom call with my mother and my sister and my brother-in-law. Evenings are with wife and family. Tuesday, the coffee break ladies are in. They get my attention. Wednesday, often do randos conversations. But Tuesday, I've already got to start working on the sermon. Throughout the week, I'm going to have different people in the neighborhood that are going to have some crisis that I'm going to have to attend to. Thursdays are, day to write the sermon and really get that thing nailed down. Fridays are Bridges of Meaning, Q&A, some Rick time, and then finishing up sermon. And then Saturdays are family and Sundays are church. So pretty much within my week, the whole week is kind of slated. And so a lot of this other stuff kind of has to fill up in between the cracks. And there'll be a week that I don't get hardly any chance to watch or read anything, and other weeks where I'll have a little bit more chance. So
do you schedule in like quiet time? I mean, I don't mean traditional Christian quiet time. I mean like no video, no music, no sermon, no, like just headspace.
I not usually, but I have a sense sometimes when I'm full up of distraction, and then it's like, you know, it's like eating too much chocolate cake. It's like, no, I just gotta sit in a room, turn everything off, and, you know, pray, meditate, process, think, or it's go for a walk. What's really nice is, you know, sometimes I'll have, I've got to go to the Bay Area. I've got to go down in the valley for a thing. So I'll have some car time. And so again, my schedule kind of affords, there's a lot in my schedule that isn't up to me. And there are other places of my schedule that is up to me. So it's kind of a nice balance, but that issue is huge.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And like me, you know, like you, we got 5 kids, you know, they're starting to have significant others. I don't have any grandkids yet. Really hoping I have some someday. You know, I've got a wife, I've got a church. You know, I got home from church yesterday and my wife says, you know, the laundry sink was all backed up. So then it was, you know, pull out the clean out and start snaking the line. So and my wife felt bad. Oh, you just got out of church and doing that. But actually, church is just people. And then dealing with a clogged sewer line, that's not a bad thing for Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sacramento, that's where you are, right? Sacramento, that could be a great place for an Exodus show. We're traveling bunch, so keep us in mind. Yeah,
if you want to come out, please keep Sacramento in mind. Right now, I've got a lot of empty rooms in a church. So
I have to figure out the logistics of all that, but that's how I'm kind of envisioning it now. Something that could be shared, you know, in different places.
Well, we could, you know, we could easily do a little festival here where, you know, we've got the auditorium where you can screen, film. We've got lots of wall space. We could put things up, and generally speaking, my church leadership is very amenable. If I usually say, let's do this, a lot of closed-minded people couldn't really handle me very well as a pastor. So a lot of them have left. So the way it is. Well, if someone listens to this and is curious, what's the best way to find you guys and maybe get involved or explore it a little bit?
They're welcome to email me. I'm good about responding. And I think you had my email there last time, but you're welcome to do that again. And so, you know, we still have new people coming in all the time. So,
okay. And the Discord stuff, is you keep that fairly closed, or is that an open thing? Or if someone wanted to, although, could they find any of you on the Bridges of Meaning Discord? Are you also there? Or
I'm there, but I don't interact much.
Okay.
So I haven't found my place in there. But if anybody wants to reach out to me there to get in contact, they can.
Okay.
And we're still sort of figuring out how to do that. That's one of the things we want to talk about in the group, because Nay, as Caleb mentioned, has done an amazing job of administrating the whole Discord channel. But it is one of the things that's come up, like the group is somewhat intimate now, I think. I mean, I feel like an outsider talking about it, but you know, what to do with people who might want to come in, or how to get that participation to work and keep the flavor of the group. But I would say a good starting place would be if they're interested in coming to the discussion and see if there's even a, you know, connection there, if it makes sense.
Okay.
So.
Okay, good. That makes good sense. All right. Anything else that we should cover before I turn off this recording device?
Just a crazy thought. These emptied out malls, It'd be a really interesting thing to see a church buy one out and put a big church sign on a mall. And
Rob
have
Bell
all-
did it
I'm
in Grand
going to
Rapids.
do it.
Oh, did
Yeah.
they? Okay.
Grand Village Mall in Granville, Michigan. When Rob Bell came to town, they bought the whole Grand Village Mall and rehabbed it as a church.
Do they, I see, because what I'm curious in is having a church where it's like a church and a studio. You have all these different spaces
Mhm.
to let people come in and work and play with each other. And then it, you know, there's a church service. There's a routine for church service beyond that. I think
That's actually just what the church that I'm going to now is looking at doing.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll have
I
to
mean-
reach out to them.
yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
The church plant, our church plant that just moved back in with us because they lost their space. They met in an art gallery,
Mhm.
and because Sunday morning wasn't, it was this tiny little community art gallery, and Sunday morning wasn't busy. So every now, for some, they sometimes had to cover up some of the artwork for church. Just because it was a little distracting depending on what show was going on at the time. But no, and they, if they hadn't they had their children's ministry space next door, and they lost their children's ministry space. And so that's when they moved back in here with us during the pandemic. So, but no, there's a lot of cool potential, but crossover between churches and art galleries.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
I'm just very grateful. That's what I want to say again. Thank you so much for encouraging this, Paul, and for creating the space where we can all come and listen and grow. And I'm also very grateful to the people that come every week. I've learned so much from them, and I appreciate the ideas that they challenge me with. And, it reminds me of listening to Rob Bell years ago, where I would say like, I'm not sure what I think about that idea, but then it would make me go explore the concept a little bit more. And that's great. It's a great opportunity for growth and for learning, and to sort of solidify what we think about things and be open-minded at the same time. So thank you. And many thanks to everybody that's been a part of it too. I'm very blessed.
well, I'm just thrilled to see this happening, and I'm so excited that you guys have a Exodus gallery that's coming, and I just can't wait to see it. So, all right, thank you all for gathering here.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay,
Thanks, Paul.
take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.